make some housekeeping rules. First, make sure you are muted, and you can use the Q&A or chat panel to submit your questions. The questions will be collected and will be answered after the whole presentation. And please keep your questions short and concise so we can make very clear answers for your questions. And we will also record the webinar, and the slides and the recorders will be sent to you after our webinar, maybe in this week before Friday. And again, your questions will be answered after the presentation. And now we will start our webinar. First, today's topic is China data security related laws, regulations, and standards. It is presented by Seconded European standardization expert in China. At the very beginning, as usual, we will make a little bit introduction about our project and like who we are and what we're doing in China. And meanwhile, to make the flow, to save the speed of the internet, I will turn off my my camera. So, Seconded European standardization expert in named CESEC. CESEC is a visibility project funded by 5 European partners, European Commission. They give us 80% of the funding, and European Free Trade Association, another, and also the 3 European standardization organizations, SAN, SANELEC, and ESSI. And our work in China is to promote European and China dialogues and cooperations in the area of standardization. And we have already started to, we have already had 4 phases of this project starting from 2006. And we are currently in CESEC 4, and the project started from 2018 to 2021. And CESEC is managed by SAN, supported by a steering committee involving with all 5 partners we mentioned earlier. And what is the goals and tasks for CESEC project? First, we promote European and international standards in China. We improve the contacts between project partners and different levels of Chinese administration, industry, and standardization bodies. We enhance the visibility and understanding of European standardization systems in China, and gathering regulatory and standardization intelligence. Last but not least, we also undertake some technical lobbies if it is necessary, or if we get the instructions from the European stakeholders or European partners. And our goals is to support European Commission's policy and European standardization organizations' strategic objectives in China. And our ultimate goal is to enhance the EU-China dialogue and cooperation in the field of standardization. And we also try to support the free cooperation agreement in place between the European standardization organizations and the China standardization organizations, SAC. Standardization covers many different areas, so we pick up several priorities with the coordination or discussion or decision made by the 5 European partners for CESEC. And on the left-hand column are the technical priorities, covers Internet of Things, information security, artificial intelligence, 5G, digitalization of industry, automated transport, medical devices, green technology or Green Deal. And on the right-hand column are the horizontal political priorities. For example, China Standards 2035, China Belt and Road Initiatives and its impact on the standardization activities, China standardization reform, if there are any, and Made in China 2025. Some institutional changes in Chinese government which will influence the standardization settings and the standardization strategy or policy of China, and some market access requirements. For example, China compulsory certification (CCC) and some China environmental certification, and also the most recently the very popular and very important certification schemes for IT security and cybersecurity. And the last one is added this year, which covers the 14th five-year plan of China and also the 14th five-year plan for the China standardization strategy. We had finished the introduction of the project, and now we focus on most recently very important development and activities related to China data security, which including the laws, regulations, and standards. First, let us see some very recent development in China related to data security or data protection. First, on 10th of June 2021, in the 29th session of China Congress, the China People's Congress, they approved the data security law. The law is the fundamental data law and is an important national security law. It will come into force on 1st of September 2021. So which means that about two months transition or grace period for this law. And based on the comments, and the law has been discussed for 2 years. And based on all the comments collected for the second draft, the following major revisions are proposed in this third draft or the final draft. First, the creation of national data security work coordination mechanism. So basically, not only one ministries, but many different ministries or government departments will work together to coordinate the national data security. Second, a strict management system will be implemented for data related to national security, national economy, people's livelihood, and major public interests. And also, there will be intelligent public services to meet the needs of the elderly and the disabled, which are added with many comments with the aging economy and China gradually into the elderly age, the elderly economy. And also there will be the improved provisions on the protection of government data security. So more improved rules or more the emphasis on the government data. The last is the increased severity of punishment for illegal actions. So some punishment rules has been added or increased during the last version. And second, very recent development for the Tesla cars. In late May 2020, just last year, Tesla cars are not allowed to enter the Chinese government office areas or park in the government buildings, which means if you are an employee of Chinese government agencies or Chinese government departments, you should not drive your Tesla car to the office because you cannot enter the campus or the office areas, or you cannot park your car. And if you some external organization employees or staffs, or like, for example, if you come from the industries, or you want to drive the car and have a meeting with the Chinese officers, you cannot drive Tesla car because it is not allowed to enter the office area, or because of the security reasons. So it means that China regarded data collections or data security in a very higher priority in most recent development. Now, let us focus on the contents for today. Why such kind of a development or such kind of activity happens in China? How China regarded data protection or data security in such a high level. So we will have four parts of today's webinar. First is some key policies and some key laws and regulations related to China data protection. And then we will focus our main topics for today's standards. And the next steps, what will happen in the next 12 months or the next 24 months. Key policies. First, China regarded the cybersecurity as a national strategy. It started from February 2014, where first the cyberspace security was mentioned with the President Xi Jinping's speech in the first meeting of a central leading group. So China set up a central leading group on cybersecurity in 2013 and 2014 and held the first meeting. And cybersecurity at that time regarded as the high priority of the national strategy. So basically, it is widely accepted by China that there is no national security without cybersecurity. And also, there will be no modernization without the information technology applications. And then come to 2016, August 2016, China published several opinions on strengthening national cybersecurity standardization work. So it is the most important document to see that standards should play a very important role to support China national security as a strategy. And cybersecurity standards is an important part of the construction of cybersecurity, and which will play fundamental regulatory and leading roles in building a secure cyberspace and the new cybersecurity or cyber government system. So we will discuss this later to see that how China standards to support the China national data protection, which way China standards will do to fulfill such tasks and responsibilities. And meanwhile, in December 2016, the National Cybersecurity Strategy was published, which is the Bible for the national cybersecurity strategies and also developments, which covers not only the economic development prediction and also the lawmaking plans, and also what is the Chinese national strategy on such high and new topics. With these three key policies, China started to, especially with the China National Cybersecurity Strategy published, several new law activities and regulation setting activities change the full play of China security activity. The very first one is China Cybersecurity Law, which was published in in 2017 and came into force on June 1st, 2016. The China cybersecurity law is a fundamental basic law for China cybersecurity management. In this law, it also proposed several sub regulations or sub activities. For example, the classified cybersecurity protection scheme (CCPS), the certification of critical network equipment and specialized cybersecurity products, the protection of critical information infrastructure (CII), and the most important and recently very popular and very headache cybersecurity review for the foreign investment. Headache with the FIE, foreign investor enterprises, and also the cybersecurity monitoring, early warning, and information notification. And with time goes by, the government feels that the data protection clauses or data protection schemes are not well emphasized in the cybersecurity law of People's Republic of China. So they started to think about how to manage the data protection or data security. First, several standards were published, and then with the data and big data and data security so important, in last 2 years, the personal information protection law and data security law was proposed to the China's State Council and also China National People's Congress. So finally, in April 2020, the Personal Information Protection Law first draft was published, and the second draft was also published in April 2021. So it is still in the stage of draft call for comments, and the second draft, the Personal Information Protection Law regulated the scope of personal information, and also the basic principles of personal information processing, and the rights of personal information and its protection. It also made the regulations of cross-border flow of personal information and the obligation of the personal information processors. And it is almost at the same time, data security law was proposed in 2019-2020, and the first draft was published in October 2020, and the second draft was in April 2021. And just in last week, on 10th of June 2021, the third draft and the final draft was approved and published on the China's government website. And it will be implemented on 1st of September 2021. And the data security law regulated the data activities, all the data activities nationally inside China. And it also emphasized the data security standard systems. It regulates the data security testing, evaluating, and certification management. In this law, it proposed the classified protection systems of different data. And the category of important data and its management were proposed in this data security law. And I believe in the future, the certification or licensing or management rules will be published to find out the category of important data. And it also proposed the early warning and emergency response or mechanism of data security, the national security review of data activities. As we mentioned, that there will be the security review and for the cybersecurity operators, and now the data activities will also be included in the national security review scheme. The data transactions and online data processing activities are also included in this law. And finally, the regulation of cross-border data flow, which will impact the business of overseas of European industries very much. Meanwhile, the Civil Code of China, which is enter in force on January 1st, 2020, also regulates the with chapters on the personalities, privacy, and personal information protection. It also sets the privacy and personal information protection in the digital age, and judicial interpretation of the course of actions of the protection of personal information dispute is also added in the Civil Code. So basically, Civil Code as a higher law, and also the three pillars of China security management and data protection law, which are China Cybersecurity Law, China Personal Information Protection Law, which is under drafting, and also the Data Security Law, which is just published in last week. Here is some highlights in the Personal Information Protection Law. First, at the very beginning, China did not make the Personal Information Protection Law. Rather, it made a standards to try to manage the personal information in 2020. And the standards of personal information protection and the law, personal information protection law, are heavily referenced or learned from the European GDPR system. So it draws foreign lawmakers' experience when we talk law, because the China lawmaking, the lawmakers referenced the Americans' Privacy Acts, the European GDPR, and also some similar laws and regulations from Japan and Korea. So it set up the extra territorial affairs provisions. It set up 7 principles of personal information processing, and in the personal information protection law, consent is no longer the only legal basis for processing the personal information. Some other obligations and responsibilities are put on the data processors or the operators. The law also outlined the requirements of the individual's separate consent and written consent for the first time. So in the previous time, it is not mentioned the written consent, but now in this law, it outlines the requirements of these particular requirements. And also it clarifies the legal liability of joint data processing and entrusted data processing. For example, if the data will be processed not only by one operator, but by also some other operators, what should be done, and who will take what kind of responsibilities or liabilities. It regulates the use of disclosed data and automated decision-making in response to the development of new technologies. So artificial intelligence are also considered in this information protection law. Other highlights: first, it makes the specific provisions on the processing of personal information by government departments. So how government departments should deal with the personal information, like the Ministry of Public Security on the people's identification, people's other personal information, fingerprint, voice, any other bio information, personal information. What is the liability and what is the responsibility from the government departments? It established the China's rule on cross-border flow of personal information. So currently, the cross-border data flow regulation are under draft, and in this law, it also emphasizes besides the general data cross-border flow, but also the personal information cross-border flow, how to deal with that, and how many data should be how many data collected or transferred cross-border should be reported or evaluated by the Chinese government. It grants individuals non-rights on the personal information, which is pretty much similar with GDPR requirements. It outlines the obligations of personal information processors. It heavily referenced or copied from the GDPR requirements on this clause. And it also details the illegal actions by levying the hefty administrative fines and providing the pro novo lawsuits. So the heavily in the draft about 50 million Chinese yuan or 5% of the last year's revenue will be fined if some illegal activities or criminal activities against the personal information collection or processing was regulated during the law. So the progress, because the personal information protection law is still under draft. It is studied from October 2020, the first draft, and also the second draft is published on April 29th of April 2021. So it regulates compared to the first draft, some changes has been made, as we have already mentioned in the previous slides. And the progress is most likely the personal information protection law will be published in this year. Most of the people estimate it will be finished in 2021. And also the government, the State Council or the People's Congress will give some transition or grace period for this law. For example, when China Cybersecurity law was published, it gives approximately 7 months grace period to let all the industries, all the organizations, all the cybersecurity operators to change and to fulfill the requirements of the law. So it is widely estimated that the personal information protection law will pretty much follow the same strategy or same process of China cybersecurity law. So when we talk about privacy and personal information protection, we'll firstly think about the GDPR. So here is some examples or some points about the personal information protection law versus the GDPR requirements. If you ask me, I will see the most of the contents are similar with the GDPR requirements, because when China lawmakers make the privacy law or personal information law, it referenced the GDPR requirements. But there are still some minor differences on the definitions or on the processes. So we listed some examples here. First, for example, the extraterritorial jurisdictions. In the GDPR requirements, it is the place of establishment, while in China's PIPL, it is the place of data processing. So it could be, it could bring some problems or some impacts for the European stakeholders if they will deal with the China personal data information. And also the different from the GDPR requirements, the controller and the processor in China are with different definitions. For example, China defined the organizations and the individuals who independently decide the personal information processing matters, such as the processing purpose and processing methods as the processor, while in GDPR, it is pretty much defined as controller. So when we talk about the controller, it will be different with the Chinese concept. And also compare with GDPR requirements, China's personal information protection law increased the compliance obligations of personal information processors in terms of sensitive personal information. So in China, the definition of the concept of personal information are also with a greater impact with the industry. So the requirements of individual consent of users will also become another threshold for the enterprises to process sensitive personal information. So if European industry fulfill the GDPR requirements, you still need to check whether in some minor areas, whether you fulfill the personal information protection requirements in China. And the third part is the most important part, which will impact the European or the FIEs or the foreign investing enterprises, is the cross-border transfers of data. So the China's personal information protection law takes notification and individual consent as a prerequisite for cross-border data transition. And in terms of the compliance path, the China stimulates that with of security assessment, personal information protection certification, signing contract with overseas recipients, etc. So basically, compared to GDPR requirements, the foreign invest companies may have may need to do the security assessment, may need to get the personal information protection certification, or may need to sign the separate contract or fulfill some government compulsory requirements. And also for the maximum fine, the GDPR requirements of 20 million euros or 4% of the previous year's global turnovers. But in China, the fine is renminbi 50 million or the 5% of the previous year's turnover. So China obviously has higher fine compared to GDPR requirements. There's a lot of articles stimulate on this comparison with this, and I do not talk about too much about that. And now we focus on the progress of the data security law. China data security law first based on the hierarchy system or classified system. So the data will be regarded with important, with different categories or different classifications. And also the administration of cross-border data transfer. So China will ask the in Article 30 stimulate how cross-border transfer will happen and how the critical information in infrastructure operators can do for the cross-border data transfer. And also the license could be introduced for the data processing services. For example, if you want to process with the data, you have to get license from the government in the future. So some more sub laws or sub regulations will be made towards these requirements, and the penalty are also introduced in the data security law in Article 44. Besides the personal information or personal data, and also the data security, some other sectoral data requirements are also introduced in China. For example, the first one is the data collection provision for automobile. So it is mainly from my personal elements are emphasized in these COFO comments, and the comments the comments will be closed on 11th of June. Other regulations, for example, the cross-border data transfer, will also be published. It is started even as early as 2019 and 2017, but even now the cross-border data transfer regulations are not finally published. There's a lot of discussion, a lot of internal debating, but I believe that with the data security law published, the cross-border data transfer regulation will be published this year, or at least latest time next year. And the financial part, in finance sectors, some COFO comments or some regulation are under drafting. For example, the customer due diligence and management measures for the preserving of customer identification data and transaction reports. So basically, it is even stricter requirements for the financial personal data protection. For example, the banks need to protect the customers' identification and also their financial situations and their transaction records. The other measures related to data protection are listed here. For example, the critical information infrastructure operators requirements, and also the supply chain security, so CIIO and CII. And as we mentioned, the data security law also proposed the national security scheme for data processing. So I believe that in the future, the data security will also be included for the cybersecurity review. The national cybersecurity review will also include the data protection and the data security. Others for the operating for the for example, the Ministry of Public Security published the implementations of the guidelines for the CCPS and the security protection systems of CII. And also in the bank and the financial parts, similar laws and regulations are published. For example, the personal protection of financial information. So the financial data are also regarded as a very important data security area. So with the cybersecurity law published and with the data security law published and also the personal information protection law are under drafting, some other sector laws and regulations will be gradually published by the Chinese government. Then we focus on the standards. So in China, especially the TC 260, it is quite important for standards making because the standards they made are not only be used as a voluntary standard, sometimes it will be upgraded to the law. For example, this one, the Personal Information Security Specification, it is published in 2020. A lot of discussion happened during the standards making from 2019, 20, and 2020. And those discussions inside the standards drafting are finally become the supporting or become some of the concepts for the lawmaking. So it can be concluded that the conclusions or the discussions or the decisions made during the standards making process are finally become very important points in the lawmaking. So a lot of or a lot of requirements comes of the people's personal information protection law are actually from these standards. So that's why it is so important to observe the activities of TC 260 and closely follow the standards drafting, because some of the standards can be as important as law, as the clauses inside the law. The other standards which are also important for the data protection is the GBT 39335 2020, the guideline for personal information security impact assessment. So basically, these standards is similar with the GDPR requirements, the GDPR's requirements of data protection impact assessment. So it is similar and with just a little minor modification or minor differences. Besides these two important standards, there is also very important standards for the governance of apps. So this is the process of the personal data protection or the guidelines for apps on the made in TC 260. So it started from August 2020, and in September 2020, there are some activities like FAQ and guidelines, and also the in November, TC 260 issued the security guidelines on using software development kit and also the mobile internet applications apps to solve the problems in collecting and using the personal information. And Cybersecurity Cyberspace Administration of China, CAC, issued the common types of personal information required in mobile internet application and clarifying the 39 types of basic functions and services and necessary personal information in apps. So apps is so important of our personal lives, and the standards and the requirements are also very important, and a lot of activities are happening in this area. In the financial sectors, not only TC 260, but some sector standards are also playing very important roles. for the data protection. For example, the standards in the financial sector. First, the technical specifications for personal financial information protection, and the financial data security guidelines for data security classification. So basically, in the cybersecurity regime, standards are even more important compared to standards in other sectors. We can see that in the data protection, each law, each regulation, there are the standards to support them. The standards can be earlier than the lawmaking, and some of the results or some of the discussions will be reflected in the lawmaking. And some standards are later than the laws and regulations, and it will fulfill and reflect all the requirements from the laws and the regulations, and with detailed requirements to support the implementation of such law and such application. Again, in other sectors, even with the regulation and the drafting for the data collection of the automobile, there is standards and drafting as well. TC 260 is making comments in May 2021 for the security requirements for data collection of information security technology collected vehicles, ICVs. So data collection of ICV, but the regulation is a data collection of all all cars and trucks or any other automobile who can in the future collect the data. And also the other standards regarding to automobile cybersecurity are listed on the left-hand columns. Other standards related to the data security are listed here. We can see that most are published in 2019 and 2020. And the earliest, the earliest year is 2013. With the quick development, technology development, and big data technology and cloud services more important in China, I believe that the data security related standards will be published more. For example, I think a lot of standards will support the recently published China data security law. For example, the data security, cybersecurity review requirements, the data processing operators licensing requirements, or the data assessment requirements. Similar standards or sub-regulations will be published in 2021 and 2022. And here is the standards under drafting, which including, for example, the security requirements for network data activities, and also the DNA data, the bio information data requirements, and also the voice print recognition data, the gait recognition data, and also the online shopping services data security guideline, the network audio and video services data security, and also the internet payment services data security guidance. Those standards usually will be published in less than 18 months. So pretty much all these standards will be published in before 2021. So what will be the next? The next is the major law will enter in force. The Personal Information The data security law is already published, will come in force, and the personal information protection law will be published as well in 2021. And the cross-border data transfer systems will be gradually improved or published by China. And the classified protection and strengthened protection of critical information infrastructure will also be improved or published in 2021. And also the other data security in different sectors, for example, in automobile, in car industries, and in the bank areas will also be enforced soon. With all these laws and regulations being published, the relevant supporting standards will be published as well. So the conclusion is that more standards related to data security will be gradually made in China in next 6 and 12 months. So this is all for today. I know that a lot of information has been included in this webinar, and I hope if you have any questions or comments, please do not be hesitant and list it in the Q&A or chat box. We can have 5 minutes for the questions. It seems there is no questions. Okay, I believe it's already, we still have 3 minutes left until 4:30. This is basically a review and covers a lot of information. We hope that this webinar or this presentation just give you some feeling about what's going on in China, and I believe the data processors or the data operating organizations will be more concerned about the differences, and but even some car industries or the automobile industries are heavily influenced by such activities in China. And I believe in the future, the industry in Europe will also need to look at what kind of information you are holding and transferring from China to your headquarters. So again, thank you for joining us for today, and the presentations and the recordings will be sent to you before this Friday. And if you happen to have more questions or comments, please send us an email. And thank you again for today, and have a lovely day. And I'll see you next time with some other new topics on China standardization. Thank you and bye.